You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders, for coders, about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer.
Complete Developer Podcast is supported by listeners like you. We are now on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Complete Developer Podcast.
Happy Fool's Day and welcome. In this special episode, we are discussing how to overcome mental barriers that keep you from doing difficult things. We'll be talking with David Whitley, otherwise known as Iron Tamer. You'll note that this is not a normal Thursday episode. We've decided to establish a tradition of having a special episode on April 1st, and you guys can check out last year's episode, Lessons from the Trickster, in the link in the show notes. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
We're still trying to get a product out the door, and it's the closing little bit, and they dropped another set of features on me, and I'm having to code them real fast. And so it's a little bit stressful. It's not really hard, but it's just tedious. And I'm hoping, probably by next week that this will be done and, kind of rolled up. They can actually start putting it in front of clients.
Yeah, I understand.
Other than that, I switched both my machines back to Windows. And that's not an April Fool's joke. I've just got some things I want to do that are going to be a little hard to do on Linux. So I went ahead and switched over. The audience will be hearing from me about the rest of that fairly soonish. So how about you, David?
I haven't been fighting anything. I don't really fight that much. I just do what I do. I have been bending a lot of steel the past few days and lifting some things, and we'll talk more about that later on, I'm sure.
Awesome. Well, I have been fighting SQL Server Reporting Studios recently. Now, first, we were having trouble with sending parameters through the URL, but we got that figured out. And then today, I had gotten everything working in dev and in test. And I was quite proud of myself. I went to tell my boss, and she says, well, that's great. What about production, or UAT, because we're not in production yet. So off I go to put it into UAT, and couldn't get the report server to connect with the UAT database. I could get it to connect to dev and test, but I eventually narrowed it down to a connection string error, but our DBA had already left for the day, so I'll get it figured out tomorrow.
It's not too bad. I mean, if you're dealing with SSRS, your dodging capabilities might be a little bit lacking.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So with that said, I have something just right for April 1st for IoTs. So let's go ahead and roll the music. This week for IoTs, I have a project called the Connected Koozie with Intel TinyTile and OctoBlue. This uses a sewn-on TinyTile to detect SIPs using the accelerometer in the TinyTile. It then sends the data to MeshBlue, where you can perform actions based on SIPs using your koozie.
So, if I had a keg of beer and I hooked up one of these things, I could actually build a cloud service that would detect when I've gone through the entire keg and could maybe even order another one. I could wire that up potentially.
Possibly assuming every glass you drank had that koozie on it.
Oh, I could make that happen.
Okay.
That's easy.
I was thinking more along the lines of a new IoT drinking game. But some of the things that they suggested were helping you make sure you drink enough water in a day.
That's okay. That's another way to do it.
Yeah, but I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Who's talking to us this week?
We've got a Google Plus comment from Casper Sieg. So just wanted to say thank you for a great show. It makes a Monday commute a lot easier to have a new episode in the headphones.
And no, that is not an April Fool's joke. That really did come from Google Plus.
Yeah. I always make fun of Google Plus, but apparently there are people actually on there. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks, Casper. Glad we make your commute more enjoyable. Send us an email to neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com and we'll send you a Complete Developer water bottle. And guys, if you'd like your very own Complete Developer water bottle, leave us a review in iTunes or comment on the website or any of our social media. We post all our episodes to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google+. We're also on Path and Tumblr. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to remind you guys that Will and I will be at Music City Code here in Nashville. It's Nashville's premier polyglot software development conference, held June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at Vanderbilt University, and you can find out more about that at musiccitycode.com.
So, Iron Tamer David Whitley is a motivational speaker and strongman based in Nashville, Tennessee. He is the author of the book Superhuman You and has performed all over the U.S. as well as internationally in Italy, the U.K., Czech Republic, Australia, and Korea. He was featured in the German documentary Kraftakt, a film about strength. He performs around the world using feats of strength such as bending steel bars, spikes, and wrenches, tearing decks of cards, twisting horseshoes, driving a nail through a board with his hand, and breaking chains. He also breaks coconuts. I don't think that made it in here yet.
Yeah.
The feats he performs are used as an illustration of the mindset needed to accomplish the impossible. His purpose is to inspire the audience to leave their limitations behind and become the greatest possible version of themselves.
So, David, if you want to do something epic, what is your thought process when deciding what to do?
When deciding what to do? Well, inspiration can come from just about anywhere. For example, recently, like Will mentioned, I've gotten into breaking coconuts, and I do this just with my hands. No tools or hammers or sharp, pointy things, anything like that. I saw a guy do it on YouTube and thought, that's really cool. And being a performing strongman, I'm constantly thinking of ways to do things with feats of strength that are interesting and entertaining, that can also have a deeper meaning to them for when I'm doing motivational speaking along with it. So I initially got inspired to do that by seeing some guys on YouTube breaking coconuts. And I thought, I've never tried that before. So I decided to explore it a little bit.
Sounds like once you see that it's possible to do it, you want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually in my my book Superhuman You, I outline the kind of the thought process behind all of it. I'm of the opinion, I'm completely convinced of this, that everybody has some sort of superhuman power. And for me, one of those things is the ability to do feats of strength. And it's something that I enjoy a great deal. I'm very passionate about it. I do put in work to make it happen, but it's always come very naturally to me as well. Hearing you guys talk about code and that sort of stuff just kind of makes my face hurt, and I kind of gloss over like a lot of people who aren't into that. So it's good that I'm on the episode on April 1st, because I don't really belong here. But yeah, in the book I talk about the 3-step process is you begin with inspiration, and then you have imagination, and then you have action. I can just keep rambling on about all that if you want me to, or if you want to ask some specific questions, we can go that way too.
Well, Will wrote the outline. What do you think, Will?
I'm trying to think of something specific. That's the problem there.
Well, one thing that I was thinking, because you talked about having seen someone do it, then wanting to do it yourself. Do you ever think of stuff you want to do and not know if it's possible?
Sure. Absolutely. Inspiration, the way I define inspiration in my life and in the talks that I give, is when you have the spark of an idea that there's something that you want to do, or that you want to have, or that you want to be. And at first it may seem completely and utterly ridiculous, because it might literally be impossible, something that no one's ever done, or something that you have no idea of how you're going to do it. But how you're going to do it doesn't really matter as much as deciding that you're going to do it. So once you decide you're going to do it, like in the case of the coconuts, seeing someone else do it let me know that it was in fact humanly possible to do, because I could tell that the guys that were doing it, that it wasn't some sort of a trick. Because obviously with just about any kind of feat of strength or any sort of physical feat like that, there's a way to do trick feats to where you're an illusionist, not a legitimate strength performer. And I'm not interested in that. I don't have anything against illusionists, but that's just not my bowl of gravy. So I see these guys breaking these coconuts, and it became possible in my mind for me to do it, because I know that if these guys can do it, then I can do it. One of my strongman mentors, an old man named Slim the Hammer Man, has said many times that if one man can do it, then another man can do it, and if you can do it, I can certainly do it. He was talking specifically about feats of strength, but really that applies to anything across the board, in any element of your life. If you want to get out of your dumb job that you have now and start your own company. People do that kind of stuff all the time. The only thing that gets in the way of you is fear.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I tell that to some of the other junior developers. We know it's possible. We just have to figure out how to do it where we are.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of goes to the next question, right? It's, what's your process for deciding, how to approach, taking on a challenge, like, breaking a coconut, for instance?
Well, for feats of strength specifically, I look at it from two different angles and make the determination of what the best way to proceed is. For what I do, there is the physiological side. There's what is the body capable of doing, and what do I need to do to prepare the body to be able to do a feat of strength. Since we're running with the coconut example, we can go for that. I knew that if I went and just wailed on a coconut as hard as I could, it might break, but my hand might break as well.
Yeah, that's when I tried it. It was pretty good. Good solid smack there.
Solid little thunk there, right? So, but understanding physiology and how the body works, there's a phenomenon called Wolff's Law that says tissue will increase in strength and density along a line of stress if it's subjected to that stress over a long enough period of time. So what I started doing is just hitting softer things in the same manner that I would hit the coconut. And I did that for diligently. Started out with 50 or 60 times a day and worked up to a few hundred times a day, every day for a couple of months, which is, I'm understanding now, is pretty fast progress toward breaking a coconut from martial arts guys that I've talked to. But you have to keep in mind that as a guy who bends steel regularly, the tissues in my hands were already quite sturdy, robust.
Yeah.
So
in just comparing that to programming, in my mind, I'm thinking that's kind of like the difference between a senior developer or mid-level, like a higher developer, versus a junior developer, whereas you already had previous experience that made it easier for you to build to that task.
Yeah. I definitely had some prerequisites in place there. If I was going to take someone from zero toward breaking a coconut, it would take a lot longer. The other thing is I know how my body responds, and so I was able to kind of fast track that a little bit. The other point of how I approach a particular feat of strength is the physics involved in it. Everything is subject to the laws of physics, and there are certain places on a coconut shell that if you strike them, you're just going to get in trouble. But there's other places, if you strike them, it'll set up a crack that goes through the shell of the coconut. It's the same way with steel. If you maximize your leverages and your body position to be able to direct all of the force into the weakest point, then you're able to get it to do what you want to do. So being able to know what I'm already capable of, and then figure out where I need to bring my game up physically, and then applying that to the physics of something is how I come up with different variations on a particular feat of strength. But that whole thing, that whole idea applies to anything that you want to do. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, who's done this before that I can look at what they're doing and start taking on these attributes of your influences. And, hopefully you got some sort of a mentor to guide you through this kind of stuff too. And I'm not necessarily just talking about feats of strength now either. I mean, I don't know coding, but I'm certain that this sort of thing applies to coding, that if you want to learn how to do it, you have to have someone explain to you what to do, and then you have to practice it.
Yeah, and I think part of the other thing too is one thing since I've known you for a long time, another thing you do a really good job of is finding people that have done stuff before.
That's actually one of my superpowers. Is like when I get really interested in something and I have that voice that's just in the back of my head that won't shut up, I somehow manage to get next to whoever the best in the world is at it.
Yeah,
I've done that multiple times with multiple different endeavors over the years, and I agree with you completely. It doesn't mean that I'm the greatest in the world at anything, but it means that I know where the sources are.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about the mentor, because when I first started coding, Will became my mentor with that, and I've told a lot of people that tell me they want to get into it or that are just starting to look into it, I say, find someone that can train you. And it may not be like sit down with you and train you, but someone that you can go to when you have questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, 'cause like the little stuff, like if I was asking David how to, break a coconut, like this, just the starting position and where you set up for the strike, that, like if I had to figure that out on my own, there might be a hospital visit required, to fix some of the bones in the hand, and, or if I tried, like cracking it in the palm of my hand, because I saw somebody do that on YouTube, an experienced person would go, hey, why don't you get it against a sturdy surface first?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that I always think of when this kind of talk comes up is I used to be a professional musician and was very, very into that from the time I was, 13 or 14 up until my mid-20s. And I would meet people that wanted to learn how to play the guitar, but they didn't want to go take lessons. Because Eddie Van Halen didn't take lessons and Jimi Hendrix didn't take lessons. And I'm like, but you're not Eddie Van Halen.
Well,
and then the other thing is, what would have happened if they had some formal instruction on the front end? And besides that, somebody taught them how to tune the damn thing. Somebody taught them how to make some chords. They didn't make all that up by themselves. So to willingly reject instruction on something is one of the most pristine forms of arrogance that you can possibly have, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
That sounds like a Twitter quote. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that'll have to come on there.
Well, willful ignorance is arrogance. There's a whole lot of people that I'm good the way I am. I don't need to learn anything new. Well, then good luck with that.
My favorite is willfully turning yourself away from the truth is treason to oneself.
Yep.
Wizard's 10th rule.
Always quote the sword of truth, huh?
Absolutely.
Well, I'll say this. We had a class on the 7 habits of highly effective people at work. We had to do part of habit 2 was your personal mission statement. And I told the class, I'm like, I already have a mission statement. And the teacher, he was really good. He was like, oh, all right, well, just write it down and then you can work on refining it and stuff like that. So I wrote down all the Wizard's rules and he comes over and he looks at it and he's like, Terry Goodkind.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what challenge, if any, did you have that initially defeated you and how'd you overcome it?
Well, if you want to go way back to the very beginning, when I was a kid in grade school, I was a chubby kid with a stutter. And I spent the majority of my time in school trying to figure out how not to get called on, which led me to screwing up in various different kinds of ways. And I figured if people are going to laugh at me, I wanted to be in charge of it, because the stuttering kid gets up and tries to do the preamble to the Constitution and becomes the object of ridicule. And that's just not a real happy place to be. So actually talking about inspiration for me, at my age, growing up and dealing with that kind of thing, I found a love for science fiction and fantasy and comic books and identified greatly with the Hulk when the Lou Ferrigno television series came on. And when I saw him, my little child mind knew that was not real, but it was a guy with makeup on, that it wasn't some sort of a suit that was making him big. And so the switch flipped for me there that a human being could become this big, monstrous thing. And that's actually how I got started lifting and got into strength in the first place, was from that. So initially, being able to get up in front of a group of other kids and talk was something that I just couldn't do. And now I get up in front of groups of people that, 300 or 400 at a time and deliver speeches. I actually did a thing a few months ago there was probably 300 people in the audience, but it was also live streaming video to I don't know how many people, but they said that it was several 100,000 people that had purchased their ticket to be able to watch all the videos for the entire 3-day conference thing that I was at. So for 20 minutes, I was in front of several 100,000 people.
Wow.
So but it's a matter of, do you want to do this thing and how far are you going to take it in the other direction? So I would say that I definitely took something that was a source of pain and indignation for me when I was a kid, and I've turned it into something that I've become fairly proficient at.
Cool. So how does your process change as you get close to a goal? Like I was thinking about, when you bent the red nail, which anybody that's, that gets into the strength stuff knows what that is, and people from outside of it don't, but it's pretty hard to bend that thing.
I can give the very brief synopsis of what the red nail equals if you want me to.
Oh, yeah.
But go ahead and finish the question just so that I make sure I understand what you're asking me.
So how does your process change as you get close to the goal? Because like I remember as you were getting close to the end of that and trying to just get it over the line, does anything change about your process?
The more you do, the better you get at it and the more confidence you gain. And and that's true with anything, right? I mean, one of the guys that's a mentor to me in steel bending is a guy named Eric Vining. He's incredibly powerful steel bender. And we were talking one day and he said, look, if you just bend about 6 miles of steel, all your questions will be answered.
Yeah.
And
that's one way to do it.
And I know you and I will have talked about this before too, about the parallels of it, because if you're going to get good at coding, just go code, right? If you're going to get good at playing the guitar, go play the guitar. We seem to have a habit in our culture of we want to be instantly expert at anything that we decide we want to do. And there's a process that goes along with that. So like for me with the red nail, what that means, the red nail, it's a piece of steel that's produced by a company called Iron Mind. And they have, if you bend it under certain stringent conditions, then you get on this roster that they have of people who've officially certified on the red nail. The piece itself is 7 inches long, 5/16 in diameter, which is based on the dimensions of what would be called a 70 penny spike or 70 penny nail. It's a big nail. And I'm not sure how much pressure it takes to bend one of those, but a 60 penny, I found out recently from Dennis Rogers, a 60 penny. Dennis Rogers is a well-known strongman and my mentor, my primary mentor in all things related to being a strongman. He told me that a 60 penny nail, which is 6 inches long and a 1/4 inch in diameter, so it's a little bit shorter and a little bit smaller in diameter, depending on the steel, it takes about 250 or 300 pounds of pressure to bend. And so I don't really do math that well to calculate what the difference is going towards a red nail, but the list of people who've done it under official conditions is less than 100 or less than 200 the last time I checked. I think I was number 108. Oddly enough.
Nice lucky number there.
Yeah, it's a nice lucky number. So the process itself, it doesn't change so much as it just gets more and more refined. And it's a trite, overused, misused statement from Bruce Lee where people say absorb what is useful and reject what is useless, right? But they leave the beginning and the end off of that. Too many people leave the beginning and the end off of that entire quote. The way that the whole quote is, it starts with research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, then make it uniquely your own. And so the beginning and the end starts out with for me, this sense of wonder, a sense of awe, like, I wonder if I can do that, and it would be awesome if I could. And then you start getting into the particulars of how to do it. The more you do it, the more you realize things that aren't the best way to do it. Some people would call that failing, but I don't really think of failure or defeat as being anything negative. It's a part of the learning process. It's like when we were little kids, when we were babies and we were figuring out how to walk, we didn't stand up and walk 3 or 4 steps and fall on our ass and be like, this walking thing's not for me. I'm just not cut out for it. There's a neurological process that goes along with it. There's full body and full intellect learning that goes along with learning to walk. And that same sort of learning process is true for anything that you want to learn how to do.
Yeah, that's interesting that you talk about that, because just today I had a conversation with one of the other junior developers at work. She was a medic in the Army before going to school and becoming a developer. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about medicine and stuff like that. And I was like, the thing I love about development and computer programming is you're expected to make mistakes. Like that's how you learn what works and what doesn't work, is you make mistakes and you iterate over that until you find what works. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's not like that in medicine. You don't get to make those mistakes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, they were already made, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's medieval medicine. Yeah. So a fair bit of that there. I mean, well, there's even some methodologies that have you start out with it broken. Like you intentionally break it so that you have like a failing test to work with, and then you cycle up. I kind of feel that way about a lot of the feats of strength stuff is, to some degree you almost have to figure out what what the failure point is, just to know, what the next thing is you got to get over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost always, with feats of strength, it's almost always a mental thing that you have to get over.
Yeah. Because I remember, I went to the old time strongman thing that you had. Mm-hmm. When was that? Was that 2013?
November 2013, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been 3.5 years.
It's been a minute, yeah.
And, I did bend some stuff, and, we'll get into that at some other time. But
you did very well.
That was the big thing for me with the horseshoe, was the fear that I was going to break my hand, or I was going to, strain something, or just, really tear myself up, was a whole lot worse than the pain in the hand. Trying to actually do it.
And it's a completely reasonable and very smart fear to have, actually, because taking a horseshoe or any other kind of piece of metal, or breaking a coconut or whatever, if you stop and think about it, it really doesn't make any damn sense to do that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times years ago when I first got into this, I would call my wife up and tell her that I'd just done some feat of strength that I'd been working on, and she would be like, "Why?"
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I got a plan, really. This is going to work.
Yeah. Well, and and the other thing we didn't really mention in the intro is you're also a Wim Hof instructor.
I am.
With the Wim Hof method. And I did this with you. It's been 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, at this point.
So for the listeners that don't know what that is, could you explain it for us?
Yes. Wim Hof is a guy from the Netherlands who... if this is the first time you've heard about him, you're going to hear a lot about him in the coming months and years, I know, because he's stumbled into something very interesting. He's been doing feats of extreme cold endurance and just extreme, what can you subject your body to kind of feats for decades. And he's been well known as that and in Guinness Book of World Records for doing stuff like swimming, I think it was like 80 meters under ice in a frozen lake. And he ran a marathon barefoot in January, 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, somewhere in Europe. Climbed Kilimanjaro with nothing but shorts and boots. Made it to Base Camp 3 in Everest and turned back because he was concerned about getting frostbite and having to potentially lose a foot on Everest. So he didn't summit Everest, but he made it to Base Camp 3 wearing shorts.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, he's been doing all this kind of stuff, and he's got some background in some yogic traditions and some breathing and meditation, a bunch of stuff like that. Very interesting story. He's actually got a new book that a guy wrote about him. A guy named Scott Carney wrote about him called "What Doesn't Kill You" or "What Doesn't Kill Us." I'm looking at the book right now. Interesting book. Scott went to debunk Wim and call him out as being a charlatan and a fraud, and wound up writing a book about how awesome he was and about how well the stuff works. Because what Wim found out is he did an experiment in some university in the Netherlands where they injected him with an endotoxin that would normally, with a normal person, give them like the most severe, horrible, I wish someone would kill me flu symptoms that you can possibly imagine for about 4 or 5 hours, and then they get over it and they're done, right? So Wim went in and willingly subjected himself to an injection of this stuff while he was hooked up to some monitors, and at the very peak of what should have been praying for death, he said he had a little bit of a headache, but it's not too bad, and then he was fine after that, and it lasted just a few seconds. And so the researchers are like, well, you're a freak of nature, and this is interesting and fascinating. And Wim says, no, what I do, anyone can do. I can teach anybody to do this. And so he went, and they got 18, if I'm not mistaken. And some of these facts may be off because my memory of it may not be 100% accurate, but the general idea is 100% accurate. He went, I think it was 18 people that he took through 4 days of training at his training center that he has. And then after that, 12 of them were randomly selected after 4 days of training. And they replicated the experiment on the 12 randomly selected people and got the same result after 4 days. And so what this is showing is there's a lot of evidence pointing towards the stuff that exists in the Wim Hof method, which is a combination of breathing exercises, cold exposure is what I've always called it, but the new term that's starting to float around is environmental conditioning, because it's not just about the cold, it's about altitude, it's about the heat, it's about humidity, all of those sorts of things. And then also the mindset and the meditation of it, that putting those things together there's evidence that points towards you can consciously influence your autonomic nervous system, the parts of your nervous system that you're not supposed to have control over. You can start to regain or gain some control, some conscious influence over regulating your own body temperature, over not getting sick when you're exposed to some sort of an environmental, bacteria or virus or whatever. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. And he's on a mission now to spread the word around because he wants everyone in the world to be healthy, happy, and strong. And health happens at a cellular level. And I tell you, just from my own experience of having done it for the past 3.5 years, it's some phenomenal stuff. It's incredibly easy to learn how to do. And it's one of those things that you see him doing some extreme feat of cold endurance. You don't have to swim under ice to get the benefits from it. You can take cold showers and get the same benefit. And everybody breathes.
That's awesome.
There's something about it that on a cellular physiological level, it taps back into something primordial that, if you look at all of the hundreds of millions of people that had to die just for us to sit here and have this conversation over the course of all of human history, those were not soft people. If you go back just a few decades, really, particularly if you go back, 500, 600, 700 years, 1,000 years, and think about the environments that we as a species have endured and thrived in, and then come up with a way to make it more comfortable for ourselves. And now we live in a world where if it gets below 65 degrees Fahrenheit or above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, it can be very uncomfortable because we've created an artificial environment, and the human body constantly adapts to whatever is going on around it. There is no off switch to adaptation. So if we put ourselves in a life where we are in that narrow temperature range 98% of the time plus, then we're going to adapt to that by down regulating whatever mechanisms would be used to endure the extreme heat or endure the extreme cold or endure the altitude or whatever. But that stuff is hardwired into us, to use a very lame computer analogy on my part, since we're on a programming show. It's in there. It's in our programming. It's just a matter of whether or not we're going to click on it and wake it back up. And the means to wake it back up is incredibly simple.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to make a joke about him finding the cure for the man flu, but then you said something that just really piqued my interest, and you and I need to talk offline or after the episode about this, because I have a theory that certain cases of irritable bowel syndrome, which is what I suffer from, are caused by autonomic dysregulation. Mainly because the only medicine that's ever worked for me was anticholinergics, or drugs that affect the neurotransmitters in the autonomic system. So let's talk about that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about your butt later. Okay.
I was bringing up the Wim Hof thing because one of the things that you taught us, as far as when you get in the ice water, is knowing the difference between discomfort and actual danger. Yes.
There's a very distinct difference between, and they're all interrelated at the same time. When you get in the cold water, if you get in an ice bath and you go in up to your neck, you experience cold, but you also experience fear, and you also experience pain. And cold just is. Fear is mental, and pain is perception. So if you stay in the water long enough, and the way that I would do this if we were working one-on-one, is I wouldn't put your entire body in the water or in the ice. I would have you stick your hand in, just your hand, and keep it there. And at first it's going to be like, this sucks, let me get it out. And that's that initial fear response. And that you don't even know what you're afraid of. You're not in any danger. It's just your hand in some cold water. But there's this primal, I'm going to die feeling that comes along with it if you're not accustomed to it. Once you understand that, it can kind of accept that, and forgive me for sounding esoteric about it, but you can accept it and then just honor it and then just let it go do its thing. And the fear dissipates. You can start to make a distinct difference between the pain and the cold. And once you start to become accustomed to the cold a little bit, the pain doesn't mean the same thing anymore. Because if you know, if you know that you're not in danger, then the pain can if you don't put any judgment on the pain's just a signal that's telling you that there's a potential threat there. It's just like being hungry. How many of us will go 3 or 4 hours without eating, feel some hunger, and then just completely freak the hell out? Hunger's not an emergency. We can literally go weeks without eating if we needed to and not die. I'm not proposing anybody do that, but it's possible. You can endure a lot more than you think you can just because you haven't done it before. And then once you've done it, you realize that the possibilities are even bigger, because like I was saying earlier, thinking about our ancestors that go back and thinking about the idea that we had early when we started the show, if one person can do it, then anybody can do it. How many people have survived extreme elements to get us to where we are now?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I guess that rolls on to the next thing, because obviously you can do more than you think you can, but the other side of this is you have to know when to stop. So how do you view rest and recovery periods when you're doing something epic?
Everything comes at a price. Everything comes at a price. The question is, what is the price and how are you going to pay it? My own take on physical training is not what a lot of people that I meet expect it to be, because I'm bending steel, or I've got a 23 cubic foot freezer that's full of frozen water sitting in my shed outside that I can get in and take ice baths any time of the year, even when it's 100 degrees here in Tennessee. Bending steel or cracking coconuts or whatever. And so there's something about that seems very breaking past your limits and all of this give 110% and all of the stuff that's on the gym memes and stuff out there too, which, as a tangent, if you take any of those popular fitness and gym memes, like what's one that's like throwing up is acceptable, falling down is acceptable, passing out's acceptable, but quitting is not acceptable, right? Take one of those.
A lot of alcoholics too.
Yeah, take one of those, pull the picture of the fitness model out, put a bunch of sorority girls doing shots in there, and it means the same thing to me. It's stupid to have that mentality, because if you tell me that you pushed past your limit and you didn't get injured physically, you didn't push past the limit. You just didn't know where the limit was to begin with.
Right.
And that's the thing. The physical body does have limits. The mind and the imagination doesn't. So the way I approach it is knowing that the body is going to adapt to whatever is going on in the environment anyway, is I give the minimal effective dose to move me in the direction that I want to go. Because if I push up against my limit and something in me breaks, my absolute limit of what I was capable of doing will contract in on itself, and I won't be able to do as much as I could. Like, if you've ever hurt your back or your knee or broken a bone or anything like that, you were able to do all this stuff, and then you got hurt, and now you can't do as much of the stuff because you broke something. And that's, by definition, that's what a limit is. The flip side of that is, if you know your limit is way over there somewhere, but you're not real sure where it is, but you keep moving towards it in a very gradual way, it'll keep moving away from you. And eventually your comfort zone will expand to engulf your old limit. And so the way I look at it is, if I want to bump up against my limit all the time, what I'm practicing physically and psychologically is I'm practicing being at my limit all the time. If I practice whatever I'm doing and I don't go near the limit, except for very rare occasions when I just kind of want to find out where I am with something. If I don't go near it, then I'm literally practicing not having a limit. And that appeals to me a lot. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. A good friend of mine who turned me on to that sort of thing is a guy named Adam Glass. And he is working on a one-arm pinch grip pull-up. And if you don't know what that is, then just go on Instagram and look for Adam T. Glass. Yeah. So my philosophy on it is, when I'm working with a client in the gym, training them especially, like, well, I could have done one more. Great. Do it in the next set. Do it next workout. I want to always be well within a comfortable place. I like people to feel better after they got done doing whatever training they're doing than they felt before they started. I like it to have a tonic effect on the nervous system. I like it to make you feel better. Pushing yourself into the ground just results in bad things happening. Now, there's a time and a place for everything. I'm not saying always take it easy all the time. always do just a little bit more, but make it be a little bit more. You know, the trite expression is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1,000 steps, but the other thing begins with a single step. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that journey is made up of thousands upon thousands of single little steps. So what is the next small step that I can take right now that moves me in the direction I want to go? And that applies not just to physical stuff, but to everything. You know, if I wanted to learn how to code, I'd probably need to spend about 6 months learning how to type first. Otherwise, my foundation's going to be skewed, right?
Yeah. And among other things, that'd probably be a good starting point.
Yeah.
So what do you do after you achieve a goal? Like, how do you handle that?
Usually drink beer.
Nice. That's what we do when we record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm low carb in it.
Yeah. It depends on what the goal is. Like, to go back to our coconut example, my initial goal was sometime in 2017, I'm going to break a coconut with my hand. And I was going to set it on concrete blocks and I was going to hit it and smash it. Well, I did that on January 9th.
Nice.
So,
I remember that.
So, what's the next step? Well, in my mind, looking at the physics of the lift or of the feat, the thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to hold it in one hand and hit it with the other one and break it. So 3 weeks later, I got that done. It was a very short period of time after that. I'm like, well, crap, what can I do next? Okay, I'm going to hold 2 coconuts, one on top of the other one, and break the bottom one like in Bloodsport, right? What the hell's a Mac? And so I did that, and then someone on the internet trolled me a little bit and said, oh, well, that's easy to do because you got the hard surface underneath. They didn't see all the preceding breaks. So because, you know, you got the hard surface and of the coconut. So really, it's like you're hitting the coconut with a coconut and breaking the bottom. He says, you want to impress me, break the top one. And I'm like, I never thought of that. Can you do it? He said, I can do it with a hammer. And I'm like, okay. So the next day I go out and I get a couple of coconuts and I bring them back home and I shot a video. It's on my YouTube channel. But quick plug, Iron Tamer YouTube, Iron Tamer Instagram, Iron Tamer Twitter, Iron Tamer Dave Whitley Facebook. Those are my social medias. So I set up the camera and I said, you know, someone asked me to try this, so I'm going to give it a try. And I want the top coconut to break. So that's where I'm directing the force. That's where I'm directing all my life energy. And smash, broke the top one. And I showed it to him and he said, okay, that's impressive. So now I've done that. So what's the next step? How about if I take a coconut and put it in a laundry bag and suspend it and have it just free hanging and hit it and see if I can break it like that. And in my mind, I hit it and it explodes and coconut goes all over the place. But what really happens is I hit it and it comes flying back at me like some sort of a bizarre strongman tetherball. And I did crack it and break it open and juice was flowing out of it, but it didn't break into pieces or anything like that. And so I watched the video and I'm like, this is such an unimpressive visual that I really don't care about the feat anymore. I know I can hit it hard enough to do it that way, but for my shows having an entertainment element to it, I want it to be visually appealing to whoever's watching it. So actually the next show that I do, I think I'm going to debut that. That'll be here in about 2 weeks at a school near Nashville. So I'm going to see if I can break a coconut for these kids.
So I guess what would you tell someone that wants to do something awesome but has no idea of what to try? I was actually discussing this upcoming episode with one of my coworkers, believe it or not, and that was a question that he suggested I ask.
You want to do something awesome, but you don't even know where to start.
Yeah, like, you know, how do you brainstorm that?
Okay. I talked about this initially when we were talking about the 3 steps that I talked about in the book. Inspiration. You've got this idea for some reason, right? It came to you in a dream or in a vision, or you saw somebody else do something and you either want to do something that somebody else did, or it gives you an idea to do something that's similar to it. So like you see one person do something, you're like, that would be really cool to do that, but to do it this other way. So you start out with that. And then what I do, and this will sound kind of bizarre, the next step in the process for me is imagination. Can I imagine myself doing this? Or can I imagine myself being this or having this, right? Like I talk to folks that want to quit their job and start a business, but they can't see what they would look like doing it. All they can come up with is the reasons why they can't do it. I got online coaching clients that I work with that like, well, you know, I want to make $300,000 a year. I'm like, okay, what would your life look like if you did that? And, you know, they're making 70 now and they don't know. And well, that's why you're not making it right there. It's because you don't know what the end looks like. You can't make it to somewhere if you don't know where there is. So this will sound kind of bizarre, but it's easier to remember something than it is to create something. So if you can get very vivid with your imagination, and this is a skill that takes practice, I suggest that you set yourself up in a way that you're not going to be disturbed. Maybe put some like relaxing music in earphones or something like that, and breathe and relax and go into like a really relaxed mental state, and picture yourself doing the thing that you want to be doing. Not like watching yourself on a movie screen. Actually, the way that I've done this, we were talking about the red nail earlier. This is how I trained up for the red nails, this very kind of thing. I would see myself on a screen, and I'm sitting in a theater in my mind, and I would see myself on a screen. Then I would get up and go climb inside the body of myself on the screen and do the thing. And my visualizations training for that red nail were so vivid that I was using some lifting chalk to help with doing the feat. Is there was a couple of times I actually sneezed from snorting chalk that was only in my imagination.
Oh, wow.
And Will, you were there when I did it, right?
Yeah, when you bent the red nail?
Yeah, when I bent the red nail. And it was, in my mind, I was in my gym. There was a group of people watching me. I didn't have faces on them. I didn't know who they were, but it turned out to be you guys that were there. And I did it in less than 30 seconds. And in reality, I did it in like 17 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
So the way that I visualized that wasn't just sitting and watching it. It was actually going and being in the experience of doing it. Neville Goddard calls it living from the fulfilled goal. If you can do that and then be in that moment, then it's a simple matter of just remembering how you got there. Like all of us can, if I say, whatever the last vacation you were on, do you remember what the inside of the room you stayed at looked like? And you can sit and think about it for a second. You can say, yeah, I remember that. Okay, you can be in that room, right? In your mind, you can be in that room. Well, do you remember how you got to that room when you were planning the vacation? Do you remember all the details that went from you're doing your normal thing to you're sitting in that room? Everything from planning the trip to, figuring out if you had to get on a plane, what time the flight was, if you're going to Uber, get the key from the guy at the hotel, unlock the door, all that stuff. You can remember every single detail of that if you sit and just put your mind to it. The imagination is so powerful. If you look around the room that you're in right now, everything that you're looking at most likely was an image in somebody's mind before it was a physical reality. I mean, I'm sitting here at my desk. I got a computer. I've got walls around me. I've got a calendar on the wall. I got books. All of this stuff didn't exist until somebody thought of it and then figured out how to do it. If you can figure out what it is and then remember in your imagination, use your imagination the same way that you're picturing yourself there. Use your imagination to remember how you got there. And that's what I do. And then, of course, the third step, inspiration, imagination, and the third step is action. Goethe said, knowing's not enough, we must apply. Willing's not enough, we must do. You can sit around and be inspired and imagine all this happening all the time, but if you don't actually get up and do the stuff that you got to do to get you there, it's not going to happen.
I mean, that's one thing we run into with the coding group that we run is trying to get people to realize what their life could be like if they actually get going on it. But the other thing is getting them to actually practice and not just goof around. And we, like you can tell within probably 30 minutes of meeting most of them which group that they fall in.
And that's how we've kind of designed. Well, we didn't really design it. We've improved on the design for the group to focus on helping those people that are taking that action. And that's a really great place to kind of wrap up. David, we want to thank you for coming on the show. I know you kind of mentioned a couple of things earlier, but how can people reach out to you if they want to find out more?
On the Book of Faces, my professional page is Iron Tamer Dave Whitley. On Twitter and Instagram and YouTube is Iron Tamer. So
awesome. Well, hey, thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Pretty much wraps us up. Before we close everything out, Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
Well, I just want to throw two things out that you can kind of observe, especially if you've been around Dave quite a bit, which I have. There's two concepts here that really go hand in hand when you want to achieve something. And the first one is actually deserving victory. Like, don't take something when you didn't earn it. Once you do earn it, accept that you earned it. Both of those seem to kind of those go together, because when I see a lot of people that either will step up to go do something and try to get the trophy even if they didn't actually accomplish something. And on the other side of it, I see people that go and do well at something and actually get the victory, and then they feel like they don't deserve it, and they talk like they don't deserve it. Both of those things are really, really insidious, because they make it where you don't continue to grow. Either you get the trophy and you got the dopamine hit and you're good, like if you're visualizing all the time even, or talking about what I'm going to do, and not actually acting on it, that will stop you from growth. But if you go and you do succeed at something and then you don't accept the fact that you won, that will also stop you from growing further beyond that.
And if I can chime in on that, both of those things are self-esteem issues.
And the latter one's the one I usually get nailed with.
And you pulled that from Terry Goodkind's 8th rule.
I probably did, yes.
Helga Vasternich, Heide Haaren for...
Wow, what a dork. Anyway, so I guess that's pretty much all I got.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with the news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.